The British Empire was a giant. It was the largest empire in history. At its peak, people said, "The sun never sets on the British Empire." This was because it was so big that it was always daytime somewhere in the empire. It controlled about a quarter of the world's land and a quarter of its people. Countries from every continent were part of this vast network linked by trade, law, and the English language. Imagine, if you will, a world map from 100 years ago, painted with big patches of red. Those red parts were all under British rule, from the snowy lands of Canada to the sunny shores of the Caribbean, stretching all the way to the great continent of Australia. This empire was built over hundreds of years. It started with small trading posts and colonies. Then it grew and grew. Britain's powerful navy ruled the seas, allowing it to control trade routes and protect its territories around the globe. The British brought their systems with them wherever they went. They built railways, set up schools, and established a system of government and law that was modelled on their own. This created a unique connection between many different cultures and peoples, all governed from a small island in Europe. This was a story of power, of ambition, and of shaping the world in Britain's own image. A process that left a deep mark on history. What if this never ended? What if, in our modern world of 2025, the Union Jack still flew over government buildings in New Delhi, Lagos and Canberra? The world we know would be unrecognizable. The very idea of independent nations like India, Nigeria or Malaysia would be just a dream. Instead, they would be provinces or territories within a single global superstate. This global empire would be a colossal entity, a single political and economic power unlike anything seen before. The history books would tell a very different story, not of independence movements and new flags, but of continued imperial administration and loyalty to the crown. The story of the 20th century would have been rewritten entirely. The great wars might have played out differently, with the full might of a united empire engaged from the start. The rise of other superpowers might have been stopped before it even began. Instead of a world of competing nations, we would have a world dominated by one singular authority. The political landscape would be simpler perhaps, but also far less diverse. The voices of countless cultures and peoples would be channeled through one imperial system, a system designed to maintain order and control from the centre, which would still be London, the enduring heart of the empire. Let's travel to some of these places in our alternate 2025. In India, the jewel in the crown, things would be vastly different. While the country might still have its incredible diversity of cultures and languages, the government would be British. The Viceroy, a powerful British governor, would rule from a grand palace in New Delhi. Major decisions about the economy, laws and foreign policy would be made thousands of miles away in London. Indian soldiers would serve in an imperial army, not a national one, ready to be sent anywhere in the empire. The bustling cities of Mumbai and Kolkata would be centres of imperial trade, their skylines a mix of ancient temples and grand Victorian-era buildings that are meticulously maintained as symbols of power. Now let's fly over to Africa. In a country like Nigeria, the traditional kings and chiefs might still exist, but their power would be limited. They would answer to a British governor. The country's vast oil wealth would not belong to the Nigerian people. Instead, it would be managed by the empire, with the profits used to fund projects across all imperial territories, from building ships in Britain to funding settlements in Australia. English would be the only official language in schools and government, pushing local languages into the background. Young Nigerians might dream of getting a good job in the imperial civil service, rather than starting their own businesses or becoming leaders of their own nation. Across the globe in Australia, life might feel more familiar yet subtly different. Australians would see themselves not as Australians first, but as British subjects living in the Pacific. Their connection to Britain would be much stronger than it is today. The head of state would not just be a distant monarch, but the active head of their government. Their economy would be tightly integrated with the empires, meaning they would trade mostly with other imperial lands like Canada or South Africa. Young people might travel to England for university as a standard path, and decisions made in the British Parliament would directly affect their daily lives, from taxes to military service. This imperial structure would create a clear hierarchy. People born in Britain might have more opportunities and be seen as the leaders. Those from the colonies, even wealthy and educated ones, might always feel like second-class citizens within the larger empire. The idea of national pride as we know it would be replaced by imperial pride. People would cheer for the empire's team in a global sports event, not for India or Kenya. Culture would become a blend, a mix of local traditions and overarching British customs, creating a unique but perhaps less authentic identity for billions of people around the world who live under this single sprawling flag. For the average person, life under a continuing British Empire would be a mix of stability and restriction. On one hand, there could be a sense of global unity. A shared language, English, would make communication across continents incredibly easy. You could travel from Hong Kong to Jamaica to South Africa and find similar laws, similar road signs, and a familiar system of government. This could create a very predictable and orderly world. The empire would likely invest heavily in infrastructure to connect its territories, meaning impressive networks of railways, ports, and perhaps even a global internet controlled and monitored from London. This would be done to ensure goods, soldiers, and information could move quickly and efficiently. However, this order would come at a significant cost to personal and political freedom. There would be no true democracy for most of the empire's citizens. Important decisions would be made by governors and officials appointed by London, not by leaders elected by the local people. If a community in Ghana disagreed with a new law, they could protest, but the final decision would not be in their hands. The idea of self-determination, the right of a people to choose their own destiny, would be seen as a dangerous and rebellious thought. The media, including newspapers and television, would likely be controlled by the state to promote loyalty to the empire and discourage ideas of independence. Culturally, the world would be less diverse. While local traditions in places like India or Nigeria would surely survive in homes and communities, the public culture would be overwhelmingly British. Children in schools across the globe would learn about British kings and queens, read English literature, and celebrate British holidays. Local history and heroes might be downplayed or ignored in the official curriculum. This constant promotion of one culture as superior could lead to a loss of identity for many, as generations grow up feeling that their own heritage is less important than that of their rulers. The world's rich tapestry of cultures would have a very large and very dominant British pattern woven through it. Economically, life would also be different. The empire would function as one giant free trade zone. This could be good for some businesses, allowing them to sell their products to a massive market without taxes or barriers. But the system would be designed to benefit the centre, Britain most of all. Raw materials like rubber from Malaysia, cotton from Egypt, and diamonds from South Africa would be shipped to Britain to be turned into finished goods. These goods would then be sold back to the colonies at a profit. This system would make it very difficult for colonies to develop their own industries, keeping them dependent on Britain and preventing them from building their own wealth. Looking at the potential positive side, a world under a single British Empire might be a world with fewer wars between nations. With one global superpower, major conflicts like the World Wars might have been avoided or been much smaller. The Empire's vast army and navy could act as a global police force, enforcing peace and stability across its territories. This concept, known as the Pax Britannica or British peace, could mean that generations of people would grow up without the fear of international conflict. Furthermore, the shared legal and administrative systems could make international trade and travel incredibly smooth, potentially leading to greater overall economic prosperity, even if it was unevenly distributed. Another possible advantage would be the rapid spread of certain kinds of development. The British were famous for building railways, bridges, and telegraph lines. In a modern imperial world, this might translate to advanced empire-wide networks for transportation and communication. A student in a remote village in Kenya could potentially have access to the same educational resources online as a student in London. Medical advances made in one part of the empire could be quickly shared and implemented across the globe. This forced standardization could lift the basic infrastructure and health systems of many regions, creating a baseline of modernity that might have otherwise taken longer to achieve on their own. However, the negative aspects are profound and undeniable. The greatest loss would be freedom. Billions of people would be denied the fundamental right to govern themselves. Their national identity would be suppressed and their political voice would be silenced. The story of human history is often seen as a journey towards liberty and self-rule. An ongoing British Empire would represent a complete stop to that journey for most of the world's population. This lack of freedom would likely lead to constant unrest, with protests and rebellions flaring up as people fought for the right to control their own lives and futures, which would be met with the full force of the imperial military. In conclusion, a world where the British Empire still rules in 2025 would be a profoundly different place. It would be a world of contrasts, of global unity and deep inequality, of technological connection and cultural loss, of enforced peace and suppressed freedom. While it might have offered a path free from some of the conflicts that defined our 20th century, it would have come at the cost of the vibrant diversity of nations and the essential human desire for self-determination. The world would be more orderly but less free, more connected but less equal. The sun may not have set on this imagined empire, but it would have cast long and dark shadows over the lives of most of the people living within it.